Hey guys, welcome back to Alex Goes Coconuts. So today is the second part of my video on tips and advice when traveling to China. Okay, so in today's video, we're actually going to talk about things like accommodations. We're also going to talk about transportation in China. I'm going to talk about safety and things you have to watch out for. And I'm also going to talk about cultural differences and etiquette in China. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is accommodations. Now, when you're booking accommodations in China, I highly suggest that you read reviews online before booking your hotel. I usually use TripAdvisor and check out what foreigners like myself think of the hotel. That'll give you a pretty good idea of what you're getting yourself into. Another thing I like to do when booking a hotel in China is that I try to book it in a central location where I'm going to have access to shops and restaurants and entertainment. Since there's a language barrier, getting around is a bit complicated, so I like to simplify my life, and just being able to walk to a restaurant or to a shop is much easier than having to take taxis everywhere to get to where I need to go. Now, my next tip is not to base your selection of hotels on star reviews. The Chinese star rating system is a little bit skewed and it doesn't always reflect the quality of the hotel. Another thing to note in China is that not all hotels accept foreigners, so definitely check that out before booking your hotel. Now, in theory, all hotels that do accept foreigners should have at least one English-speaking staff on hand. But it's not always the case, so definitely don't rely on that. That's why I like to read reviews and see what other people have to say about the hotel. Another tip I have is usually when choosing a hotel, I would recommend you grab the newest hotel. There's such a construction boom in China. There's like tons of hotels being built, and the newer hotels usually are more eager to please, and they usually have pretty much the same rates as an older, more rundown hotel. Now, if you're trying to get the best prices on hotels, don't be shy about bargaining. China is a bargaining culture, and you'll usually get a better price if you walk into the hotel and bargain at the counter. Now, if you're booking ahead of time online, I don't suggest that you use a Chinese travel agent or any kind of travel agency. Usually the room rates will be more expensive than what you'll get on the hotel website. So definitely check out the hotel website, check out the deals that they're offering, and you can also call the international booking line and try to see if you can bargain a better deal with them. Also, when you're selecting your room, I would totally get a standard room and then negotiate for a better room once you're at the counter and you're talking to the person in front of you. Now, another way to save money is that Chinese hotels are not really too fussy about matching the number of people staying in the room to the number of beds. So if you're traveling as a family, instead of grabbing two connecting rooms, you might be able to just share, like, let's say a twin bedroom where they have two double beds. You can also ask for a cot to be added to the room for a small charge, and it will cost you a lot less to do that than to grab two different rooms. Now, getting around within China can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. Booking plane tickets and train tickets and bus tickets can be quite complicated when you're trying to do it yourself. Most online sites are all in Chinese, so you won't be able to understand. So I highly recommend that you use a Chinese-based travel agency. For example, I always use Ctrip. Ctrip has now changed their name. I think it's trip.com if you want to check it out. They also offer the best prices because they get the best deals, so it's totally worth using them to book your transportation. Now, there's three ways of getting from city to city within China. You can either fly, you can take a train, or you can take a bus. So flying in China is sometimes a little bit frustrating because there's so many delays. There's so many people traveling within the country and into the country that you're gonna have a lot of air traffic. My main tip is if you're taking a flight in China, try to book the earliest flight possible. Usually morning flights have a lot less travelers traveling on them, so you're gonna have an easier time navigating the airport, but you're also gonna decrease the chances of your flight getting delayed. Another thing that I wanted to mention is when you're flying locally, you won't be able to carry any liquids onto your carry-on. Now, like I said, because there's so many delays with flying, another great option to getting around is taking trains in China. Now, China has tons of high-speed trains that'll bring you from city to city, and these high-speed trains are state-of-the-art, and it's a really nice way to travel just because you'll have so many less delays. Now, another way to get around is by bus. This is definitely the cheapest option. The only problem with bus travels is that they are very crowded, and sometimes you're sitting in the bus for a really long time because there's a lot of traffic on the road. That's the only downside about bus travel, but it's still a really great way to get around, especially if you're on a tight budget. Okay, now let's talk about getting around within the city. The best way to get around is definitely by taxi, just because taxis are cheap and they're usually readily available. Now, taxis, even though they're the best way to get around, can be really frustrating. Most taxi drivers do not speak a word of English, and they will not understand exactly where you want to go, so you will have to have the address and the name of your destination written in Chinese. If you're staying in a hotel, definitely take a business card from the hotel with the address on it written in Chinese. That way, if you do get lost at one point, you can just hop a taxi and give him your card so he can bring you back to the hotel. Now, another really frustrating thing about taxis is that sometimes they'll just outright refuse to drive you to where you want to go. They're actually doing this because they're looking for a customer that will give them a higher fare. Now, it's not really legal and they're not really supposed to do this, but unfortunately, it happens a lot in China. So my tip for you is to be a little bit forceful. Sometimes I'll just hop into the taxi anyway, or you could just try your luck with the next taxi driver. Now, sometimes if there's several of them in a row that do this to me, I usually offer them a little bit more money. I'll usually offer them 20 or 30 RMB to bring me to the destination, and they'll usually accept with a little bit of bribery like that. Now, taxis don't always have working seatbelts, so that's one thing I suggest you do is as soon as you get into a taxi, make sure that the seatbelt works. You definitely don't want to get into an accident and not have a seatbelt on you. Now, another way to get around the city is to take the subway or the underground. The subway system in China is actually a really great way to get around the big cities. They're usually air conditioned, they're usually super clean, and they're super efficient. So I often use a subway. I actually prefer it to taking taxis when it's available. Now, if you don't want to use the underground or a taxi, there's also something equivalent to Uber in China. It's called DiDi. Now, using DiDi is pretty simple because they have an English version of the application that you can download onto your phone. Now, once you set your destination, the driver will actually call your phone and he will be speaking in Chinese, so you won't understand. At this point, just hang up and go onto the DiDi app and just text them your location. China is actually really a safe country to travel to, especially if you're a woman traveling alone. There's very little violent crimes in China, and often there's so many people in the streets that you can go out at night and walk around alone without any trouble at all. It's also a really great country to bring young children to. It's extremely safe and there's a lot of activities for young children. Now, like any country you're traveling to, you always have to be vigilant when you're a foreigner. I mean, it makes you a target for certain crimes. For example, pickpocketing, like I had mentioned in my other video. There are quite a lot of pickpockets in China, so it's definitely something you're gonna have to watch out for. There are also some really well-known scams. I'm just going to cover a few of those scams so that you can watch out for them and make sure that you don't get had. One of the first things you're going to encounter when arriving at the airport or in a train station or in a bus station, you're actually going to see a lot of fake taxi drivers ask you if you need a lift or a ride. These people are locals just looking to get you into their car, and they're going to charge you a higher fare. So what you want to do is avoid going with these people. Just follow the signs to the taxi stands. Now, another thing you have to watch out for is actually getting fake money in China. There's a lot of scammers out there that switch out real bills for fake bills. This has actually happened to me twice. Now, the way that I was scammed was that I actually took a taxi and I paid the fare. And the taxi driver took my money and then he said, "Oh no, this is a fake bill," and gave me back a bill. What he actually did was switch out the real bill for a fake bill, and that way he slipped me some fake money. So if you're paying for something and the person says, "Oh no, it's fake money," double check, make sure that it's not them who switched out the bill. It doesn't just happen in taxis, it can happen at any merchant. Now, one of the greatest dangers in China is actually crossing the road. I know this sounds ridiculous, but cars don't actually stop for pedestrians in China. So this is something you gotta be really, really careful about. When you're crossing the road, definitely stop, look on both sides of the road. If you see an oncoming car, don't cross, even if it's a crosswalk, because cars just won't slow down and sometimes they literally won't even stop for you. Okay, I also want to talk about pollution. Pollution in China is a really big problem, and you're going to see a lot of people walking around with masks. There's a lot of smog in China, and sometimes they even shut down schools because the smog is so bad and it's really a health risk. Especially if you have respiratory problems, you might want to bring a mask with you and wear it throughout the day. I know that I suffer from asthma, and it's happened to me a few times where I had an asthma attack just because the air quality was so bad. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is bathrooms in China. Not all bathrooms have Western style toilets, like with toilet bowls. Some bathrooms have squat toilets. Basically, it's a ceramic hole on the ground and you have to squat to use it. Also, another thing to note is that there's not usually toilet paper in some of these toilets. So definitely carry around a little pack of tissues with you. And sometimes they won't have hand soap available. So definitely carry around some antibacterial wipes or some antibacterial gel so that you can clean your hands afterwards. Another thing that might be, kind of off-putting for certain Westerners, but is very common in China, is you'll have a bit of shoving and pushing. Now, it doesn't happen everywhere, especially like in the big cities. You won't have anybody pushing you or shoving you out of the way. You're gonna encounter this mostly in train stations or bus stations when there's long lineups. Sometimes people are late for their flight, or they're trying to get ahead in the line. They're gonna push their way through the crowd. Now, don't take this as an offense. China is such a big country and it's so populated that that's the way that they learn to get what they need. And if somebody is pushing you or shoving you out of the way, just step aside and let them pass. Usually it's a lot less frustrating than getting upset about it. Okay, so my next tip is about bargaining. Chinese merchants love to bargain. So whenever you're gonna be buying something, especially like at the markets, you definitely wanna bargain hard. They're gonna charge you a really expensive price for whatever you're interested in, and you're expected to bargain. Now, in Chinese culture, people don't usually split bills. So if you're inviting somebody to dinner, or if you're getting invited to dinner, usually people share a meal in China. They won't usually order a dish for themselves. Everything is ordered and put into the middle of the table and shared by everyone sitting at the table. Another thing to be prepared for is often your host will put something in your bowl or in your dish for you to try. This is a sign of hospitality, so don't get offended if somebody's actually putting food into your bowl. Chopsticks will always be offered with your meal, but if you're not able to eat with chopsticks, don't be shy to ask for utensils. There's utensils readily available in every single restaurant. Now, I highly recommend that you avoid tap water in China, and that includes like iced drinks. Now, tipping in China is not usually common practice. Like if you go to a restaurant, usually people don't tip the waiters. If you want to tip, go right ahead. They're gonna be happy to accept your money, but it's just not something, don't feel obliged to tip your waiter or whatever. Okay guys, so that's pretty much all my tips and advice for when traveling to China. Be sure to check out part 1 of this video for more information, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them best as I can, or if you have any suggestions that I might have forgotten. Thanks for watching guys, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the little bell for notifications. Happy travels, bye!